When you build a business just for the money, you generally tend to build yourself a job. You don't build yourself a business. And this is what I was guilty of. I was trading time for money. I had no boundaries. I was anything but free. So when you're building a freedom first business, you are building it backwards. You're saying, this is the life that I want to live. This is how I want to show up in my business every day. This is the amount of money that I want to make. How can I build a business that accommodates for that?
I have a very dumb question to start.
Okay.
I was looking at your LinkedIn, speaking of LinkedIn.
Okay.
Doing a little sleuthing for today for the interview. And I was seeing you were working from some pretty cool brands, Ralph Lauren, Diesel, Burberry. And your title was buyer. What is a buyer?
Great question. Great question to kick off. What is a buyer? So a buyer, essentially, if you look at the brands that I have worked with, let's talk about Ralph Lauren, Burberry, Kate Spade, Diesel. You go into one of their stores. Essentially, the buyer is responsible for all of the product that's in those stores. So without the buyer, and this may have changed in the age of AI, but traditionally, without the buyer, you don't have product on your shop floors to sell. You don't have products on your website to sell because essentially the buyer is responsible for the budget. Let's say, for example, in Burberry, I had about 200 million to spend on product. So the designer's designing the product. I'm then getting quite strategic and looking back over our past sales for the past few years and saying, do you know what? Handbags have done really well. Trench coats have done really well. We need to invest more money in these trench coats, but shoes, not so much. Shoes aren't really performing, so we can probably reduce our spend on shoes. The designers design the products. I'm like, yep, no. This is how much money we're putting behind the scarves, the handbags, whatever the category is. Mm-hmm. And then I choose how many we're buying of that. And then I'm responsible until it then gets onto that shop floor from the warehouse, from the supplier, wherever we're getting it from. I'll be able to say, I want this many. I'm responsible for all of the ordering process, everything until it literally is on the shop floor. I've probably also worked with the merchandising team who creates the shop floor plans to decide where it's being placed strategically on the shop floor. And we're going to say, this is what we want the marketing to be focused on this month because we've bought 100,000 of these t-shirts or whatever. So essentially the buyer is kind of like the crux of a whole retail or e-commerce business because they are the one that is building the strategy around the product. Without the product, the retailer has nothing to sell.
I would have never have known that's even a position. So the designers will create stuff and you're just deciding like how much of which one
exactly
for them to make for you to produce. And then are you in charge of like a region and a certain amount of stores, or you just give the stores the strategy?
It depends who you're buying for. Where I was buying for premium luxury brands, because they are design led, so there's designers in the business, it's more strategy. So you're getting really strategic about the numbers, the analytics. This is what worked last year. This is what doesn't work. And you are maybe responsible for a region, because if you think about the differences between, let's say, we're talking about fashion brands, right? The fashion in Europe to the fashion in the US, the fashion in Asia. If you're buying for all of those regions, they're all going to be very different, the way that you buy, because let's just take handbags, for example. When I worked for Kate Spade, the handbags that worked in the US were quite like big, chunky bags. The ones that worked in Europe are like crossbodies. The ones that work in Asia are these tiny little coin purses because no one wants to carry their stuff. So you're having to put your money in different places depending on where you're buying for. So some buyers are regional buyers because they have that knowledge of the region that they're living in or working in, and then some might buy for the whole world essentially. But you have to be quite strategic and have a different strategy for each region that you're buying for.
Is it safe to say you have like a big love for fashion? Is that how you kind of got into this game, or?
Actually, no. So I ended up in fashion because I was voted the best dressed in my yearbook at school. That really? is literally why I ended up in fashion, because I had no idea. I was 16 when I left school. I didn't go to university. I had no interest in going to university. I'm not a traditional learner because I don't learn in the way of like listening, reading, writing, somebody teaching me information. I learn by doing things. And the traditional university setup, meant that I would have had to sit in a classroom for however many hours a day, try and absorb that information is in a way that my brain doesn't work, then try and go and implement it. I knew very early on that that wasn't going to be a good idea for me. So I didn't even bother applying for university. No one was pushing me towards that. I think most people in my life at that point knew that that probably wasn't the right fit for me. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but then, I got voted the best dressed in my yearbook when I left school and was like, oh, clearly I'm meant to be in fashion. So explored some options to do a fashion college between the ages of 16 and 18, and essentially left school very young, actually, like 16, and I was commuting into London every day to go to this college at 16 years old. My mum paid for my train ticket every month. I'd go on the train on my own. It's like probably a 45-50 minute commute from where my parents were living at the time. And I'd go to this school, and this school wasn't like your traditional learning setup. It was like, okay, today we're going to make a dress. Today we're going to create a PR strategy for this company, this product. So it was very interactive, which is the way that my brain learns, which is kinesthetic learning. And I think that was really good for me because it was very engaging. The whole purpose of this college was essentially to teach young people to get into a job. It wasn't to educate you any further. It's literally to teach you the life skills that you need to work in the fashion industry. So that was kind of how I ended up in that. To be honest, it was like, I think I saw this fashion college and everything. My whole life is a bit of a whim. Like I just follow little trains of information and see what happens. But I think a girl that had been in the year above me at school had gone to this same fashion college. And I think I saw it on her back then MySpace, probably. And I was like, that's interested, followed that train, tried to figure out what this college was all about, heard their theme tune, which was What Have You Done Today? You know the song? That was the theme tune of their like college trailer. And I was like, I love that. let's go. This is where I want to go. And I was watching all of their YouTube videos and it looked like the dream place to go. So I followed that little snippet of information, and that ended up being my career for 12 years.
Wow. It's very interesting to hear because in the US, like, not that we don't have these types of colleges, but they're not the ones that are ever talked about. Like a lot of people I think in high school that you just have no idea. And the typical route in the US is just, well, let me go to college and figure it out. Let me like take out these giant student loans and figure it out. And most of them are to educate. They aren't necessarily like, there's parts to get you a job, but the general is like what you said. And it is very interesting just to hear that because of, I feel like it's a very different mindset from maybe the US to Europe because you don't have those big loans, or it's just maybe it's not the typical career path. I don't know.
But even in the UK, I don't think it's the typical career path. I think this was, what year was I when I left school? Like 2008, I think. And that wasn't normal. Like most people stayed into higher education at school. Like all of my friends pretty much stayed into higher education at school, and they did their extra 2 years till they were 18. That's called the A-levels in the UK. Maybe it's changed the name now. I've got no idea. And then you go to university after that. I was a bit of an anomaly leaving school at 16. That wasn't really the done thing. There were a handful of people that were doing it, but those people were going to train as plumbers, engineers, hairdressers, more like physical work that you're going to go and do out in the world that you can do apprenticeships in. It was very, very weird in a way that I went and did fashion at 16 years old. Yeah. That wasn't a normal done thing for sure. The normal route is to carry on your education until you're 18 and go to university in the same way to get the life experience to figure out what you want to do. There's not many 16-year-olds that know what they want to do, particularly in the UK, I don't think.
Sure. So you were a buyer for a while at these brands you were working. It looks like at some point you shifted to being like freelance, doing the same thing. What was that shift like and how did that come to be?
So I was a buyer for 12 years. So I worked for various different companies. And actually it was the COVID lockdown that made me make that shift, because freelance in buying, it doesn't exist. That's not a thing. And I worked my way up. I was very young when I started in fashion, and that meant that I progressed very, very quickly. So by, I think, the first year that I was working in a buying job, which was when I was 18, I had been promoted twice within the first 2 years, more or less. So by the age of like 21, I was a manager of people, which is pretty unheard of. Most 21-year-olds are out partying at university. So I had quite a lot of responsibility very early on, worked my way up in that career. And then by how old? Like 27, 28, I'm a bit like, well, what's next for my career? Like all of my directors, my managers have this like very clear progression plan because I'd worked my way up so very clearly and quickly. And I was very successful. Like most of my peers at that age when I left the industry, which was when I think I was 27 or 28, I can't actually remember. Most of them thought that I would go on to be a director, senior director, CEO of one of these companies. And that was their progression plan for me. Mm-hmm. And I got to a point where I think I'd known it for a long time, actually, like a few years, that I didn't really want to be in this industry anymore. But I carrying on because I didn't know any differently. I didn't know that I could do something else. And then it got to a point where the last job that I was in, to be honest, was very toxic. It wasn't very good. I was waking up every day with panic attack, like anxiety, really not feeling okay, not really knowing what I wanted to do next. But I had been traveling at this point a lot throughout my career in terms of like traveling for work. I'd taken career breaks at certain points to go on travel trips. And I knew that travel was like, other than my job as a buyer, travel was a massive part of my identity. And I just thought, okay, I need to get out of this job. I'm not happy here. So I quit. When I quit, that was January 2020. And I had I think 2.5, 3 month notice period or something. So my last day fell on the day after we went into lockdown. And I was like, okay, I can see. And ironically, I was meant to go to China in February 2020. I have a Chinese visa in my passport because I was meant to go to Asia to help them, the company that I was working for, the head office in Asia, set up a new system that would been implemented in Europe or whatever. Obviously didn't go on that trip. And then I'd already put my notice in. So, okay, I'm leaving in March 2020. We go into lockdown. I can't remember what date it was, but we go into lockdown literally days before my last day at my company. And at that point, it's a bit too late to go back because the whole retail industry is shutting down. So they don't need me. They don't need me anymore. I've already quit. My boss is a little bit bitter that I'd already quit, to be honest. That's a whole other story. But he wasn't particularly impressed that I didn't want to go on this progression plan that he had for me. So there I was, jobless in lockdown. I had a mortgage. I was living in London. I was living in this apartment with my friend. We co-bought it together a few years prior to that. So I had to pay my bills. Otherwise, I was going to be kicked out of my house. So I had to figure out what I was going to do. And the natural thing to do was essentially, what skills have I already got? What experiences do I have? The brand names that I've worked for sell me very easily. So literally, I think I switched my LinkedIn profile to Freelance or something like that. And within days, I kind of had people messaging me, wanting to work with me, because it also obviously very nicely lined up coincidentally with a time where a lot of people were starting e-commerce businesses. And I had all of this retail and e-commerce background and knowledge. And I was building, at the time when I left my corporate career, I was building 5-year plans for a £380 million business. Like, I knew what I was doing in terms of building strategy. So I was like, why can't I take all of this experience, take all of this knowledge that I have and create this for smaller businesses? So essentially I went freelance, took on a few clients, have no idea how to run a freelance business, honestly, but just was trying to replicate some of the things that I knew from the industry. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But a lot of it was like looking at, okay, this is what I used to do for these big retailers that have grown to this massive revenue. What can I take from this? What lessons can I learn and bring that into my own business, but also other people's smaller businesses?
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to something. One of those moments that you talked about is when you quit, all of a sudden in the middle of lockdown, you said you were living alone. And now it sounds like you had the motivation, like you had to get money back in the door to get in your job and different stuff. But what was that moment like when you're living alone and I'm sure there's a period before you had your knowing what you're going to do, was that really scary? Did you doubt that decision? Did you think about going back?
I think I had about 5 minutes where I doubted my decision and thought I needed to go back, because I think I'd already started building something in the background in about February 2020, because I could kind of see the trajectory of like where things were going. And luckily at that time, mortgage companies were giving you mortgage breaks. So it was up to 3 or 4 months, I think. And because I didn't know what the situation was going to be, I applied for a mortgage break just in case. And bearing in mind, I quit to go traveling. So I was actually meant to go traveling in that April. That was kind of the plan. And then I was thinking about maybe starting a business, doing something for myself with the option of going back into buying later on down the line. But I couldn't go traveling. Obviously, literally airports were closed. So I'd already in my mind had this, I was already leaving. I was already not going to have a job. So I already had savings. I think I probably had about 15, maybe £20,000 in savings in the bank. So that, don't get me wrong, that doesn't last a long time in London when you've got a mortgage. But if I wasn't going out, if I had a mortgage break, I just needed to literally buy my groceries. I didn't have loads of financial responsibilities. I don't have kids. I didn't at the time have a partner. Like, there was nothing really that I needed to spend money on. So I wasn't freaking out at all. And I am traditionally someone that leaves jobs without anything else to go to. So this wasn't the first experience that I'd had of this. And I think I knew at the time, going back into that job, even if there had been an opportunity to, which there wasn't, because they were laying people off and putting everybody on furlough at the time, I wouldn't have been happy. So I've really tried to prioritize my happiness over anything else and let that be the driver of whatever it was to come next. So I wasn't fearful. I wasn't regretful. It was like, this is my situation. Now, don't get me wrong, when it comes to earning money, your first money in freelance gigs, it's hard. And I think it took me from when I quit to actually getting money in my bank account, maybe 3 months. I had people messaging me straight away, but it didn't actually translate into revenue straight away. So about 3 months. And there was a point in that 3 months where I was like, ooh, have I made the right decision? Is this going to work? And then suddenly when it starts working, it just flew from there and it worked really well. So then I had a lot more confidence in my abilities, but I always backed myself, honestly. I knew I was really good at what I did. I'd worked in this industry since I was 16 years old. I'd already had progression plans for people putting me as the next CEO of one of these big companies. Like, I wasn't scared in terms of what I was doing. I really backed myself under that. But obviously in the unknown, there's always a little bit of uncertainty.
And you mentioned that one boss, it sounds like you rubbed you the wrong way. But at the same time, you were getting these quick promotions. It seemed like you were very good at it. They were setting up the progression plans all the way to the CEO.
Yeah.
Why not just continue on that path? It's a great path for a lot of people.
It is a great path for a lot of people. And it was a great path for me. Like, it was an amazing path for me. I traveled all over the world as a buyer. I had good money as a buyer. There was security. I had okay colleagues and experiences within the offices that I was working on. But was I happy? No, I wasn't happy. And I hadn't been happy for a long time. Like, I'd worked for 4 of the biggest fashion companies in the world. And I'm not a corporate person at all. I wasn't even a corporate person back then. And in some of these jobs, some more so than others, because of my personality, I'm not someone that just sits there and accepts things as they are. I will challenge things. I will ask the questions. I will say the things that people don't want to say. That doesn't really work in a corporate dynamic very well. So in some companies, not all of them, some of them accepted that in fine ways, but others not so much. I think in some of the companies that I was in, like, that just wasn't going to fly. And I knew that. And I knew that I was like the rebel corporate girl. And I think I probably knew that I shouldn't have been in the corporate world at least 3 or 4 years before I left, in all honesty. But what else was I meant to do? I had no idea. I had no one to expand me into this different lifestyle or world or opportunities or options and starting a business. Honestly, I did not have that belief that I could do that. I had no idea that was possible for me. The only time that even occurred to me, I went to a tarot reading in 2018. Okay. And I was going through a lot of life change. I'd just gone through a breakup. I was changing jobs. Lots of things were happening in my life and shifting. And this woman sits me down and she's like, yeah, you're going to start a business. And I looked at her, I was like, no, I'm not. Like, absolutely not. There's no chance of doing anything by myself. I'm a fashion buyer. That's my whole identity. That's not happening. I've got no idea where I'd even start with that. I did not have the self-belief that I'd be able to go and do something by myself. And I don't even know where that self-belief came from, in all honesty, but I did know that I was good at what I did. So I knew that I could transfer that in some ways.
That's awesome. It's, I think it's a really scary place when you have this path already laid out for you, but somewhere for whatever reason, it just doesn't fit for you. And you know you have to do something, but there's a lot of unknown. And that's really what this podcast is all about. And so you start freelancing. You said it took a few months, but 3 months, I feel like it's still pretty quick for you to get some monetary success. So start to become bigger. It was also COVID. So like, when did you make the shift to nomading? Was that at all a part of the original idea to go freelance and stuff like that? And were you just like waiting the second things opened up with COVID? Like, how did that come to be?
Yes, it was very much part of the idea. I had been to Bali in 2017, and I remember I was on holiday with my ex-boyfriend, and we just started seeing people that were working in coffee shops on their laptops. I had a friend that was living in Bali, and I was like, what the hell is she doing in Bali? And she was just figuring it out. She was making it work. She was a graphic designer at the time / artist, making things work. Her boyfriend was running a company in Bali. So I just had this expansion into, okay, this is possible. Like, people work abroad. And I'd been traveling for a really long time at this point. Like, I've always been a traveler since my early 20s. That was a dream for me when I suddenly recognized that people were actually living and working abroad. I was like, oh, wow, okay. And I lived and worked abroad for my job before I moved to Italy. But in the fashion industry, working remotely, nomading, probably very similar to how it is in engineering, that's not a thing. Like, it's really not a thing. It follows very traditional work approaches. And I had no idea that could even be possible for somebody like me in the role that I was doing. So when I saw that in Bali, I kind of made it my side quest to figure out how I could make that happen for myself. And I do remember saying to my ex-boyfriend, maybe we should learn how to be English teachers and just go and move to Thailand, China, like wherever there's an opportunity for a job. Because in my head, that was the only way people were doing that. I had no idea that people were starting these online businesses and creating something or going freelance or whatever it might be to get them into that situation. I thought I had to be a teacher to do that. So actually, alongside starting my business, I did actually do a Teach English as a Foreign Language certificate just as a backup option in case this online business didn't work out, in case freelancing didn't work out. So I think at the back of my mind, nomading was always there. I didn't know how I was going to get to that point. But when I started my business, it was very much with the intention of, this has to be fully remote. This cannot be an in-person business. I have to build this fully online so that I'm able to travel, so that I'm able to be a nomad, so that I'm able to move to Bali, because that was my vision, right? That's all I knew what nomad life was. And so that's how I built it, basically. But I didn't actually start nomading. I built my business. I started my business in April 2020. And then I started nomading in, I think it was like September or October 2021. So about 18 months in. But I will say that I built the foundations of my business and the way that I was working in London. I then could just have the flexibility and the freedom to shift from wherever I was to go to Bali. And I think I tested it. I went to Greece in that summer just before I moved. Mm-hmm. And I tested it in Greece. I think I tested it in France before I went all in on going to Bali. But as soon as those Bali borders opened, and bearing in mind we're still COVID times in 2021, I had to apply for a business visa to get into Bali. It wasn't just open for you to go. And you had to quarantine for 10 days in a Jakarta hotel before you even got onto the island. So it was an effort to get into Bali. But that just shows how much I wanted to be there, because I was willing to pay all the money and go through all of the effort to get there. So it took about, 16 to 18 months before I made that leap from business owner in London to actually going nomad.
And so after you get to Bali, after you're done with the quarantine, Was there a moment there, or was it maybe the next destination that you were like, yeah, this is going to be the new lifestyle?
Actually, when I moved to Bali, I moved to Bali. I didn't intend to travel or like move around. The goal was to move to Bali, and I achieved that goal like very, very quickly. So I was in Bali probably about a year. And then I was like, I'm getting a little bit itchy feet. I kind of want to travel again. Bali has a habit of, people call Bali the washing machine. They like, you come to Bali, it spins you around and it kicks you back out. And I felt like I was in the Bali washing machine when I left after a year. And I was like, I'm just going to go to Thailand for Christmas. So I went to Thailand for Christmas, met my sister in Thailand, did a little Thai trip. I went on a meditation retreat in a Thai monastery up near Pai. Changed my life. I did a Muay Thai camp, and then I started to get this like sense of travel back. I hadn't really had that when I was in Bali, and actually also the reason I was in Bali so long was the visa I was on doesn't permit you to travel. Okay. It was like you had to stay in Bali. If you left Bali, or Indonesia, sorry, if you left Indonesia, you sacrifice your visa, you have to start the process again, and it's not a cheap visa. It was like maybe £600 or something for the 6 months that I was there, and then another £600 to renew it. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it wasn't like super cheap. So I didn't want to sacrifice the visa. I ended up staying in Bali because I couldn't really leave. And then when I went to Thailand, I started getting this like travel bug again. And then it just kind of went from there, to be honest. So this is January 2022. And then I did go back to Bali for a period of time. And then I felt the same like urge again. And I was like, I want to leave. I don't think I want to be here anymore. And I had friends, I had a house. I was pretty well set up in Bali. Like I had the community. I'd drive down the street and be like, oh, hiya. Like I knew people. I had a really nice life there. I had my routine, but it just wasn't quite what I wanted at that time. I felt like my time there had kind of come to an end, and even my friends could see that. They were like, you're not happy here anymore. Like when I first met you, you were super happy here, you loved it. Now I don't think this is the right place for you. So I had that feeling again, a little bit like when I left the corporate world, that this just isn't quite the right environment for me anymore. So I think what happened, I think I was dating someone and that lived in New Zealand. So I left Bali, went to New Zealand. From there, I went to Vietnam. Then I went back to Europe. And then from there, to be honest, it was always like, I have a friend's wedding at this side of the world. I have to go and meet my sister on this date at this place. So I'd end up just like bopping between places just purely coincidentally, not even really by choice of like where I wanted to go. And then I think it was like August 2023 that I was like, I'm going to go to Latin America. I've never been to Latin America. And that's when I feel like my proper digital nomad life kind of started, because it was like, okay, now you're really like living nomad life. We're bopping around like intentionally with your laptop. Before it was accidental digital nomad life. And then at some point I was like, oh, okay, I'm a digital nomad now. This is apparently my life now. I don't have a home. I don't have a base. And because ever since I'd gone to that meditation retreat and learned how to meditate and live really presently, I was loving that. I was just like living in flow with wherever life was kind of taking me. But the intention, to be honest, was never to be a digital nomad. It was just to live abroad.
And making that transition from London to living in permanent Bali and falling into the nomad life, like traveling a lot quicker, was there anything that you really struggled with in terms of like balancing that in your business? And did it take a bit to kind of find that balance? Yes.
So when I moved to Bali, I had built my business in London. London's very fast paced, working 12-hour days. I had no boundaries. I didn't know how to set boundaries. I was just working. So when I moved to Bali and I'm transitioning from London pace to island time, that doesn't work. That's not sustainable. You want to go out and enjoy your life. The whole point that you're being a digital nomad or living abroad is to go and live the lifestyle abroad. And I wasn't able to experience that. At some point I was waking up at 4 a.m. to have calls with my clients because it was like 7 p.m. at night for them. And I'm like, that's not sustainable. I'm not functioning at 4 a.m. And I really remember this actually. There was a girl that I met in the first month that I was in Bali, and she took me to the gym with her one day, like to try a new gym. And she sat me down after the gym. She was like, you know, your pace right now is not sustainable, right? And I just looked at her like, I barely know this girl. I've met her like the past 3 weeks. And she was like, you're going to burn out. You're going to really struggle. Like, you need to stop, basically. And I was like, who are you to tell me what to do? Obviously. But it's always stuck with me, because actually what she said kind of changed my life, because then I started looking at it and was like, actually, yeah, this isn't actually sustainable. And then, you know how if you ignore your intuition, you ignore your body enough times, it stops you in your tracks. So I moved into Bali, October 2021. By February 2022, I get COVID quite badly. It wipes me out for about 12 weeks, to the point where I've got COVID, but I'm still waking up at 4 a.m. to try and do these calls. I've got no energy whatsoever. I'm in bed all day. So unwell. And that really like stopped me in my tracks. Actually, I lost my voice for about 6 days because my throat was so inflamed and I couldn't do any of my calls. So I had to really start learning the boundaries and how to communicate that actually I'm not okay right now. I can't deliver the work that I've said I can deliver. And before, that would have like really troubled me. I would have really struggled to say, sorry, I can't do this. I would have just pushed myself to do it. And that was super unhealthy. And I think me getting so sick in Bali, not being able to enjoy the situation at all, it actually resulted in me taking about 5 or 6 months off my business. I was still maintaining clients. Anyone that I already had in any of my programs, in any of my coachings or whatever, I was still maintaining it, but I wasn't taking anybody new on. I wasn't marketing myself. I completely paused. And that was a massive wake-up call, because I realized unless you design your business to work for you, the lifestyle that you want to live and the energy that you have to deliver, it's just completely unsustainable in the long run. And that transition from hustle culture in London to island time, chill, relax vibes in Bali was like such a big change, because the mindset is so different. I hadn't really seen how it could be done at that point. Like, how could I create a business on Bali time when I built it on London time? So I literally had to take a really hard look at myself and be like, what you're doing is unsustainable. This is what's not working. This is what is working. How are you going to fix this? And that was the start of me pivoting my business to work more efficiently for me.
And I know at some point you also started or co-founded a project around mental health. Mm-hmm. Was this around that same time too, or was that later?
It was later, but it was fueled from the experiences that I'd had in that time. So my mental health has always been quite up and down. Like, I had a mental breakdown in 2018, actually, before I even moved to Bali. And it was bad. I was like having panic attacks pretty much every day. This is kind of around the same time that I was leaving one of my jobs to go into a different buying job. I'd just gone through a really bad breakup. I really wasn't okay. I'd say I was in a very deep depression for about 8 or 9 months in 2018. So I had a history of like poor mental health anyway. And then after that, it was all about like trying to figure out, how do I manage this? Because I've never been educated on mental health. I had to figure it out myself. So when then this happened, when I was in Bali and I was wiped out, couldn't work, I essentially was like, well, is this my mental health causing these physical problems at the same time? And in Bali, you've got all of the things that you could experiment with, right? Meditation, breathwork, all of the different modalities that you could try. So I started experimenting, and my chosen modality for something that really worked for me to manage my anxiety and anything that I was struggling with at the time was Reiki. And I went and did a Reiki training, and then I started doing breathwork, and then I started more meditation. And the same girl that had actually said to me, Sophie, this isn't sustainable, she put me on this membership, and this membership is like a manifestation membership, but not your traditional woo-woo manifestation. It's all about manifesting and healing yourself so that you can call in the things that you want, and going into your subconscious patterns, breaking your limiting beliefs, all of that. So I was going through a massive like healing journey at the same time as trying to just maintain my own business. That then a couple of years later, actually no, there's one bit I've missed out of the story. I met this girl in Bali called Kelsey, And she was the one that actually got me into breathwork. So separate girl to the first one that's telling me that I need to slow down. A few months later, having another little meltdown, I think mid-COVID situation about my business and what am I going to do because I can't sustain it at the rate that I'm going. I meet Kelsey, and Kelsey is an ex-psychologist. She worked in an inpatient mental health ward back in the US when she lived there. Since gone digital nomad, since like changed her life, has a very long story of mental health with herself and also in her family. So she literally sat there and was like, you need to start doing breath work. And actually the things that she told me to do and change really significantly changed the way that I saw myself, the way that I was showing up for myself, the way I was looking after myself. And then in turn, my mental health improved very drastically. So a couple of years later, I think it's 2020, I'm in Albania. I have this random idea about like this platform that I can create. I'm literally on the beach jotting down like all of these random ideas and thinking, I've been thinking about starting a mental health business because I've gone through some stuff with my own mental health. I've figured out things and modalities that work for me. So I just end up writing down all of these ideas, and that forms into the concept of TINAH, which is time is not a healer. And I start building out an idea for a mental health e-commerce marketplace because I wanted to combine my personal experiences with the mental health stuff with my professional experiences, which was in e-commerce and retail. So I tried to like merge the two. And when Kelsey, who's the one that got me into breathwork, heard what I was doing, because we were still friends but living on the other side of the world, she was like, I want to do this with you. Like, she has the professional background. I knew that I couldn't really start a mental health business on my own because I don't have that professional background in that industry. Who am I to start a mental health business with no qualifications, only personal experiences? But together, combined, we had the personal experience and the professional experience. So we ended up starting TINAH, which is also known as Time is Not a Healer. It was a mental health e-commerce marketplace platform. We started working on that in probably like September 2023 and went all in really like for about a year. And that obviously meant that my original business and her original business sacrificed a little bit because it's very hard to maintain a business whilst you're going all in on another one. So at some point along the lines, we got the business launched. We had loads of partners. Everyone we were speaking to was like really excited about what we were doing. We were getting some press. Like it was doing well, but we weren't making enough money to justify doing it full time. So we stripped it back and we're doing it like part time alongside our own businesses. And then I think both of us had some life changes, and it kind of got to a point where we were like, this actually isn't good for our own mental health. We can't be building a mental health business, and sacrifice our own mental health because we're trying to juggle too many things. So we actually put the project on pause in February 2025. So we were running for 18 months before we put it on pause. It's still on pause. We haven't completely passed the idea. We really love the concept of it, but I think in its form that we tried to build it in and tried to make it work in wasn't sustainable for the way that for the season of life that we were currently in at that time. And I think if we bring it back later on down the line, we're still both very passionate about the subject, passionate about the mission behind the business, which is essentially to help people access resources. Like, the mental health world around the world is very broken because people don't have access to the resources that they need. The waiting lists for therapy services or anything, any support, is super, super long in most places unless you have money to pay for it. Our platform was somewhere someone could go and instantly access information and the resources and the routines that they might need to actually change their life. So we really believe in the mission of it. It's just that in the format that it was set up in wasn't quite working for us. So unfortunately we did have to park it. But I learned so much from building that, and it was an amazing experience. I don't regret doing that at all. It really jeopardized my first business for sure, and that was in turn the beginning of the end of my first e-commerce consultancy business. But it was a really good experience, and I think at some point that business will be back. Just don't know what form it's going to come back in yet.
Are there a couple of things that you learned in creating that company and that journey for you that today are still like the most important things that you do for yourself to maintain your mental health?
I think the biggest thing that I learned from creating that company is you can't overcomplicate things. Like, we were trying to build, and that business, to be honest, is set up like a corporate big company, because I had the corporate background. Kelsey is an operations coach. She's very systematic and like knows how to create processes and systems and structures in a business. But we were trying to do that as a 2-person team with very little budget, no resource. So our project was so much bigger than the capacity that we had to hold it. So I think we massively overcomplicated things because we were trying to build and grow at a rate that was completely unsustainable for both of us. And that had a lot of detrimental impact on both of our own businesses. So I think that was the beginning of me trying to really simplify absolutely everything that I do, because we just overcomplicated things. So the biggest lesson for me out of that is the simpler you can do things, the better, and the easier your life is. And actually simple works generally better than when you overcomplicate everything as well, because at the end of the day, your energy, where you put your energy is where you're going to get the results. If your energy is scattered between 10 different social media platforms, trying to edit a podcast, trying to create relationships with brands that you want to sell on your e-commerce marketplace, trying to create content for the website, trying to edit all of the things, what are you achieving? Like, nothing's happening when you try and do all of those things. So it really allowed me to look at the way that I was working and look at my own business and say, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're trying to do too much for one little person. Either you have to bring more people in, or you have to strip back and really only focus on the things that you want to do and want to achieve. And actually that is now the whole premise of my business, is to really build things in alignment with your strengths, your abilities, the things that you're passionate about, because it makes things so much easier.
And it's kind of the ultimate test too, right? You're building a business for mental health and a beautiful mission, trying to help a lot of people in a really dark place that you were in, yet you're doing it in a way that's hurting your own. And at what point can you live in that truth, right? And so that must have been a very difficult decision that I'm sure you both had to do. I want to go to something you kind of alluded to it here, but in the last like few weeks that we've known each other, you said it a couple of times that you burnt your old business down.
Yes.
Why? What does that mean?
So as I was building the mental health marketplace, I was still trying to run my e-commerce consultancy, which is the one that I'd set up. So after the freelance stuff at the beginning of 2021 that I was doing, it ventured into so many different directions, that e-commerce consultancy business. I was mentoring, I was group coaching, I had a membership, I was doing digital products, courses, like so many different things. I tried so many different online business models. And then obviously I started this e-commerce business. It meant that I didn't have the time or the capacity to really give my all into my e-commerce business. And I think in some ways I was building TINAH, the mental health marketplace, as a way to not have to focus on my e-commerce business, because I think for a while I'd been feeling a little bit like I'm not that passionate about this. And I was getting clients that were coming to me, and I was having quite difficult experiences with them, or they were having products that, again, I'm not that passionate about. So I'm really struggling to help you build strategies for it, because this isn't something that I really care for. Not everybody, obviously, but like a few people that came through. And in for a while, I was like, I just don't really enjoy this anymore. So I think I was trying in some ways to make TINAH my thing. That was my plan, was to like take that and that be my business essentially, and not have to do the e-commerce consultancy stuff anymore. But when TINAH then doesn't really work out, or I'm starting to say, actually, this isn't quite sustainable because we're not making money, I had to continue making money from my e-commerce consultancy. So it was still ticking along and it's still making me money, but not in the capacity that it was making me money before TINAH. Like before TINAH, I was really consistent with my income. I was getting really high value clients. In the middle of TINAH, all of that was just kind of a bit chaotic and overwhelming. So trying to manage the two things wasn't sustainable, firstly. Secondly, I was starting to realize that e-commerce just wasn't my passion. Not that I don't believe in some of the products that I was working with at the time. It was just like this this doesn't have any like bigger purpose. Like for example, if I was working with a fashion brand, I'm like, it's another dress brand, it's another yoga brand. I don't see that this is going to give me fulfillment, because I really feel like I need bigger purpose, a bigger meaning. So then I started working with businesses that had a bigger meaning. Like I worked with journal brand, for example, who was trying to change the way that people saw themselves. So I was like, that's great. And then I worked with a supplements business, and she's trying to change the way that people look at their health and their wellness. So I was like, great, these businesses have so much more purpose and passion and something a bit deeper behind them. And I enjoyed that, but I still felt like my business didn't have that bigger purpose, which again is probably why I was going towards TINAH, because it did have this bigger mission. So it came to a point where quite naturally a lot of my clients fell off. This is probably like mid 2024. At the same time, I'm going through another breakup. My nan passes away. I'm selling my property. I'm really not okay in 2024. In all honesty, I had a lot of things going on in my life. And at the same time, my mental health was obviously really, really poor. I start losing all my clients, and not in bad ways, not in ways like, we don't want to work with you anymore. It was just like, we don't have the budget to work with you anymore, or, oh, we're shutting down our company, we don't need to work with you anymore, or whatever the reason was. So things naturally started to drop off. And then when I lost I still had one client, I think, that I'd been working with for 2 or 3 years at this point, because most of my clients at the time I was working with on like a long-term basis. And it got to like September 2024, and I lost that last client, and I was like, what the hell am I gonna do now? So I had to really like take another look at myself and be like, is this actually what you want to do? Are you gonna still battle to try and get e-commerce clients when you're not that passionate about it? Or is this the time that you pivot? At the time, I was in the process of selling my property in London, the one that I was talking about when I was living there when we went into COVID. And I knew that I had a really large chunk of money coming to me within the next couple of months. So if there was ever a time to stop doing something and start something else, this was going to be it, because I knew that I was going to have a chunk of money to support me whilst I built something else. And it took me a while to come to accept that first business that I had started and built is coming to an end. And it took me a long time, actually, like a good 6 months to really be like, this isn't what you're going to do. For a while, I was still trying to like dabble in doing it and trying to get the clients. But it wasn't until I fully committed to being like, okay, we need to start something different now. We need to go in a different direction, that things started to feel a little bit more in flow and nice again. Before that, it felt like I was literally like battling against just basically walking into a brick wall over and over and over again until a door opened, and then suddenly I was able to walk through. So essentially, I had to release everything that I had built over the past, this is 5 years in at this point, release everything that I'd built over the past 4.5, 5 years, and say, this isn't working anymore. It's time to try something different.
Was there a moment, you said it was like that, a long period before you realized I have to fully let it go? Or was there a specific moment or thing that happened that was just like, this is enough?
Yes, I think it was when I actually had another conversation. Kelsey has been very prominent in most of these things. Shout out Kelsey. I think we were having a call. At this time, we're still doing TINAH, right? We're still like doing it, but maybe not at our full capacity anymore. So I'm having this conversation with Kelsey on a call. I'm literally breaking down to her, being like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what to do. And she's like, so what do people come to you for? Like now in your life, like what advice are people coming to you for? And I'm like, well, actually, like most of the people that I meet along the way, like bearing in mind I've been a nomad at this point for 3 or 4 years, I'm meeting a lot of people over and over and over again, share parts of my story with them. And a lot of people that come to me later on down the line are like, Sophie, I met you a year ago and something that you said has changed the whole course correction of my life. And I'm like, oh, okay. So people are coming to me accidentally, not really asking me for anything, but I'm giving them a nugget of information that is changing something about the way that they work, the way that they show up, the way they see themselves, the way they do go operate their day-to-day life. Maybe there's something in that I need to explore to help people get back on track with the path that they're meant to be living. And at this point, I've got 4.5, 5 years of business experience on top of the 12 years that I had in the fashion industry. I have a lot of experience here to offer somebody, and help people that are very similar to me 6 years ago who don't want to do what they're doing anymore and start their own e-commerce business, not e-commerce business, start their own service business, start their own digital product business, whatever online business that they want to do. Because at this point, I've tried every online business model that there probably is to create. And I realized maybe I need to start sharing my own story, my own journey a little bit more heavily, because before I could get away with just talking about e-commerce stuff and my career, and that would be enough to market to get clients in. If I was going to shift my business model, I needed to start talking about myself and building myself a personal brand and talking about all of the elements of my life. And I'd already started doing that a little bit with the TINAH stuff, because I'd had to start talking about my mental health quite publicly online in order to understand why I'm creating a mental health business. But yeah, I think it was a massive shift of like, okay, what can I help people with right now, and what am I actually organically doing? That was how I ended up coming onto the fact that I want to help people that were like me in that 9 to 5 change the course correct their lives. If they don't want to be there anymore, how can we get them onto the path that actually feels right for them?
Building, I think you call it like freedom first businesses, right?
Exactly.
What's the biggest difference between a regular online business maximizing for money versus one maximizing for freedom?
When you build a business just for the money, you generally tend to build yourself a job. You don't build yourself a business. And this is what I was guilty of in that first 18 months when I was building in London, transferred to Bali, burnt out. I built myself a glorified job. In all honesty, I was trading time for money. I had no boundaries. I wasn't setting my routine and my structure to work for the lifestyle that I wanted to live. So I was anything but free, particularly mentally. I wasn't mentally free. Yes, I had some financial freedom. Yes, I had some location freedom. Yes, I did have time freedom, but my time was still being dictated by the clients that were coming and working with me. So when you're building a freedom first business, you are building it backwards. You're saying, this is the life that I want to live. This is how I want to show up in my business every day. This is the amount of money that I want to make. How can I build a business that accommodates for that? Because I had built my business in the other way. I'd been like, I need money ASAP because I've got a mortgage to pay. I live in London. It's not sustainable for me to not earn money. How can I make as much money as possible in a short space of time? And that led me to have really bad habits. It led me to taking on things that were out of alignment. And then ultimately that just led me to feel like crap and burn out and not be able to work on my business for 5-6 months because my mental health was so bad. So a freedom first business essentially is building a business that feels like it's in alignment with the life that you actually want to live, because there's multiple layers to freedom, right? You can have time freedom, location freedom, financial freedom, emotional freedom, mental freedom, all of the different freedoms.
Schedule freedom.
Exactly, schedule freedom. So many different levels of freedoms. But if you don't build your business intentionally, you're going to get none of those.
And so a lot of people, I feel like, that are on the highway and they're curious about the dirt path. They're curious about starting their own freedom first business. I think one of the things that I see that trips them up is, I really want that. I really want this lifestyle, but I just don't know what to do. Do you have any advice to those people that they desperately want to take the dirt path? They want to build their freedom first business. I'm sure they have some skill sets, but is there any like journaling sessions, any activities that you recommend for somebody in that position of, I'm just not sure what business to start?
I think it's a very common problem to not know what to start, because I wouldn't have known that I was going to start an e-commerce business when I was still in my 9 to 5, honestly. Actually, the first business I experimented with out of that job was trying to sell career coaching to students that wanted to get into the fashion industry, because I thought that was the route to go down. Realized very quickly that students didn't have any money to invest in career coaching at the time. So that was never going to work out. So I actually don't think your idea matters so much at this stage, actually, controversially maybe, because your idea is going to change. Doesn't really matter what your first idea is going to be. So you don't need to have this perfect plan. Actually, the first thing that you need to do before you even think about what idea it is that you're going to pursue as your first idea, because it's going to go on many different directions most probably, is look at yourself really honestly and say, what do I want? Because if your idea doesn't match what you want, it's probably not going to work out anyway. So I would say don't even worry about the idea for now. That's not that important. We can come back to that later on down the line, but you need to get really clear on what you want your life to look like. And if that's really different to how you're living your life right now, then you can start thinking about, right, what do I like about what I'm doing right now? What skills do I already have that are transferable? What am I passionate about? What do I enjoy doing? What are the things that I want to bring from my current circumstance into my new circumstance? And on the other hand, what do I not want to bring? What else don't I want to bring over to this new experience that I'm going to have? And then from there, you can start thinking about your idea. But you have to get really honest and clear with yourself at the end of the day. Pretty much everything in this life comes from having a level of self-awareness and clarity into where you want to go or what you want to do next. And I think that this is one of the biggest prime examples of that. You need to know where you want to go in order for you to actually even think about what idea you need to create.
And I find so often we like paralyze ourselves. We have this thing. It's a very genuine thing. I have no idea what business to start. I was there. I was there years and years ago when I first knew I wanted to leave engineering to do this life. I had no idea what to start. I eventually then just put my energy elsewhere, and like I found a job that would let me nomad. So I did the lifestyle first and then this. But months ago when I left the company, I still had no idea. But the difference this time is I started taking action. I said, this is what I want, to have this freedom. I had a lot of freedom in my 9-to-5, more than anybody else in that industry. It was very unique, but I wanted total control of my freedom. And starting to actually take action. I mean, like you said, I've started now with a business idea I've launched. I know 100% I'm going to be changing what I do. It's just a matter of when, and it's trying different things and figuring out. But the amount I've learned these past couple months has been kind of insane, of myself, of business, meeting people like you that have been there ahead of me and willing to share advice. And we're just having chats. Like last night we were talking about to do an application or not to do an application. Seems to be on the mind with a lot of people. So I can definitely back that one up. You've been doing a podcast for a while. How long has it been now?
So I had my podcast since 2022, but I took a break. And obviously, as my business evolved, my podcast has changed also. So I had the podcast around e-commerce stuff, and now it's shifted more towards like building online businesses remotely and freedom first founders.
Any memorable episodes, any memorable moments that from the pod recently or in times past that you've maybe sometime around now, like started to replay in your mind and like use that to remind yourself?
Definitely. There was a girl that came on my podcast probably about 6 months ago or so, and she was me, but future me. I've had a few people that are like future me on the podcast, and it's like, okay, this girl started nomading at the same time as me, started her business at the same time as me, different subject. She was in social media content creation or something like that. But she had got her business to a certain level, the same level as me, experimented with building a second business on the side, sacrificed her first business, decided to burn it all down and restart, and tripled her income to multiple 6 figures. And I looked at that conversation, and the whole time I was like, oh, thank God, like I'm doing the right thing because someone else has done it and they've had success doing this. Why can't I? Because I think we have to expand ourselves into knowing what is possible for ourselves. We have to have these conversations with people that are 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps ahead of us to know and see that it's going to be okay because that person's done it, so you can do it too. And not just seeing it on social media, because social media can be a massive lie, right? Like who knows what is true and false on social media, particularly in this current age of AI. But if you have the conversations with these people and they've already gone through that experience and they've got proof and evidence, the way that they're talking, you can normally tell if someone's being genuine or not. That is really expansive. And I think that particular episode, her name is Nadine. I can't remember what the episode's called online.
We'll put in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. But that was very expansive for me. And I was like, I'm on the right path when I listened to her talking.
The power of seeing somebody on a path that's done it successfully and it's somewhat of a similar one you want to go down. I mean, it's a big reason why I'm doing this podcast is there's going to be somebody listening to your episode and it ding, 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 ding. Like this is the exact thing I want. There's going to be other people that don't resonate as much as yours and they do as somebody else's, and that's perfectly fine. And it's all about like, we all are doing things very, very differently. But when you have somebody that just, there's something about them. It's what you want. They have a similar attitude, similar beliefs. The power of that, like there's this unlock that happens in your brain, right? And all of a sudden it's, wow, I can do anything, you know?
Absolutely. I think for me, podcasts is where I've had so many of those moments, honestly. Like before I started my first business, before I even quit my last job, like my last 9-to-5 job, the year before that, because I had a 45-minute commute or something to my office, every morning, every evening on the tube, I was listening to a business related podcast because I was already planting seeds in myself and expanding myself into what was possible. And my favorite podcast at that moment in time was How I Built This by Guy Raz. And he used to share so many stories of like founders of Ben and Jerry, of Cocoa Water or whatever it's called, all of these stories. And I was like just taking and absorbing all of these nuggets of information. And the way that they were thinking was very similar to how I think. And that was the first time that I started thinking, oh, there's other people that think like me. Oh, maybe I could follow in that footsteps. I don't particularly want a company as large as Ben and Jerry's, but you know, like some of the lessons that they've had, I can replicate in a smaller business. And I think unless you hear these people talking and having those conversations, you never know, right? Like you have to listen to it. You have to see it to be true. Even going back to when I first went to Bali in 2017 and start seeing people working on their laptops, that was the first time that I was expanded into seeing people that could potentially work online. I didn't have the terminology to know that was expansion at the time, or that was my future self looking like I could, what I wanted to do in the future. But now I reflect back on that, there's been so many expansion moments throughout the people that I meet in a day-to-day environment, the podcast that I listen to. And that's also the main reason why I started my podcast, honestly, was to help expand people into what is actually possible for them.
Yeah. The power of breaking out of the bubble. Wherever you live, you're in a bubble.
Yeah.
The people, the culture, the way of thinking. So travel is a big unlock, different experiences, like you were saying, with breath work and stuff like this. The power is really big. Sophie, thank you so much for coming on. It's been awesome getting to know you here this last month and doing some co-working days. You're about to hit a co-working day right now, which I'm excited about. Thanks for coming on and sharing your wisdom. You have a beautiful, beautiful journey. I learned a lot today, like what is a buyer? Thank you so much. So where can people go to follow you? What's the podcast? How can people support?
You're welcome. And thank you so much. You're a great interviewer. And my podcast is called The Remote CEO Life. It's available on all good podcasting platforms. And if you want to check out any of the things that I offer, it's www.itssophiebiggerstaff.com.
Beautiful. We'll put all that in the show notes. The last question for you is, why the dirt path? So we have, again, a lot of people are on the highway. Some people might literally be on the highway to an unaligned job and an unaligned lifestyle this very moment listening. But people like you are trailblazing the dirt path, right? You realized pretty early on, like you wanted to do something different with the fashion school. Then you wanted to freelance and then live abroad to Nomad and then heck, burn it all down and start anew. And each one of those, there's so many different questions I wanted to ask because each one has a lot of different things you mentally have to overcome with yourself, with other people. You have no idea if you're making the right choice. You're just kind of going in the dark on this dirt path. So it's very difficult. So why do it? Why the dirt path?
Because it's difficult. I think when you're on the highway, you can just drive blind. You can keep going straight. You know that you're going to go in the same direction. And for some people, that's what they should be doing. Totally fair enough. But if you even have a slight bit of curiosity and you start looking out the window of the car whilst you're going down the highway and you're like, what's down that road? What's down this road? You can keep going straight on the highway and you're going to get to the destination that you know you're going to get to eventually at the end. But when you are on the dirt path and you take that little right turn or left turn off the road and you start going down the dirt track, it's like unexpected things come out. There is so much growth that is going to come out of that. And you're out of your comfort zone. And the best things usually happen when you step outside of your comfort zone. So I don't think this life is for everybody. And I would never encourage it for everybody. But I do believe that if you even have one little bit of curiosity around what is off one of these like side roads that is coming off the highway, there's something to explore there, and you need to get curious about it, because when you step outside your comfort zone, really amazing things can happen.
Beautiful. Sophie, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Dirt Path podcast. You can find any links to support or follow today's Trailblazer in the description below. If you got this far and really liked today's episode, it would mean a lot if you could give us a 5 stars wherever you found this podcast, subscribe and like on YouTube, and email us. Email us at thedirtpathpodcast@gmail.com to give us feedback, to give us an update of you on your own dirt path, or to send us questions, as we might be doing some Q&A episodes in the future. All right. We'll see you next time here on the Dirt Path.
Saw the exit sign flash by, a whisper in the breeze said, take a chance, don't wonder why, just follow where it leads. Oh, the dirt path, it ain't easy, no map to guide the way. Slow and hard, sometimes uneasy, you stumble through the clay. No signs to tell you where you're bound, no traffic to obey. But every step on broken ground builds something great someday.